Welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. I'm your host, Dave Mabel, and I really appreciate that you tune in to listen each week. I'm excited to say that my wife Dee and I are headed to Lincoln, Nebraska this August to line up in the 75-mile Garmin Gravel Worlds. We'll be racing our tandem, but not against the now infamous Dutch tandem duo who almost won the 150-mile race last year. They can have the 150. We'll be waiting for them at the finish line. I mean, at least I hope we'll be done before them. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because today's guest is a founder of what has become one of the monuments of gravel, Corey Cornbread Godfrey. I have many memories of Cornbread from his days doing Trans-Iowa. Whether I was there or not, his name, along with guys like Joe Miser, John Gorilla, Joe Partridge, all names I remember following on Guitar Ted's Trans-Iowa updates and blog posts. So, grab yourself a cup of chain and spoke coffee and join me in welcoming Garmin Gravel World's founder and Gravel Hall of Famer, Corey Cornbread Godfrey. Corey Cornbread Godfrey, welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. I'm so glad to have you on. You are actually my first, I think, any Hall of Famer, much less Gravel Hall of Famer, but my first Gravel Hall of Famer on the podcast. So welcome to Bike Talk with Dave.
Well, Dave, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Sweet. Well, you have a long resume, but I'm going to focus on a few things. One is our Trans-Iowa history a little bit together and a lot not together. You were an 11-time, you lined up 11 times on Trans-Iowa. We'll talk a bit about that. Gravel Hall of Fame, that's awesome. And the inaugural inductees, is that what you call yourselves? The inaugural or the...
Yeah, I guess inaugural class or inductees.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And founded, I guess, via the Pirate Cycling League of Nebraska, the Gravel Worlds, which is super cool. Mm-hmm. Which I think your history in Trans-Iowa and creating Gravel Worlds probably led you to Gravel Hall of Fame. But anyway, welcome to the show. All of that said, I'm most curious about where'd the nickname Cornbread come from?
Well, that's a story. So
good. That's why we're here, man.
Yeah. So I came to Lincoln from the Cleveland, Ohio area. I grew up in a small town called Conneaut. Went to school at Ohio University, did my undergrad and grad there. And then it was right around 2000. It was like 1999. The job market was pretty tough. I don't know if you remember that. So I was bound and determined to find a job. So I sent my resume out to every hospital and cardiac rehab facility in the country. I think even some international places. I sent out like 400 cover letters and resumes.
Oh my!
And Lincoln, Nebraska was one of the places that contacted me for an interview. So I'd already determined, like, I'm going to go, I think it was Memphis I wanted to go to, or maybe it was New York. Like, I'm going to go one of those places. And Lincoln's like, hey, we'll fly you out. And like, all right, like, I'll go check it out. I've never been to Lincoln. I couldn't even identify Nebraska on the map, but flew out, checked it out, saw the awesome trail system in Lincoln. And after the visit, being here for 3 days, decided I wanted to come. So that's what got me out to Lincoln. But, going from Ohio to Nebraska, not knowing anybody, that's always a kind of a tough transition. So for races, I started doing bike races right away, mountain bike races. I usually would just show up with cornbread because I got kind of into a kick of making cornbread. So people didn't really know who I was. I was this tall new guy in the area, and he always brought cornbread to the bike race because I'd usually hand some out too to people, like, hey, you want some cornbread? So people just started calling me Cornbread, and the name kind of stuck. So that was 2000, and I've kind of had the nickname since.
That's awesome. I love that. I don't know if I ever got any of your cornbread. I'm going to have to hunt you down. You still make it?
I don't. I mean, I kind of got out of that. Like, and the people kept bugging me, like, hey, where's your cornbread, man? Like, that's your name. Like, dude, like, I don't have time to bake right now. Riding my bike.
That's funny. So what got you started on a bike?
Well, I was in college, and well, I guess we can go way back. I mean, as a kid, started riding bikes, and we used to ride actually on gravel as kids in my small town, Conneaut. So we had some friends who lived out in the country, and we would just go out and explore. My hometown has quite a few cool covered bridges we try to ride to.
Mm.
So that was something we usually try to do, and a lot of those are off of gravel roads. So for me, as a little kid, exploration, and then that kind of transitioned the same reason when I was an adult in college, able to go explore some stuff and get around campus because Ohio University is kind of a larger campus. Just getting across campus was much quicker. And then I tried a mountain bike race in college, and just the beginner category on like a $200 mountain bike, an old Raleigh. Crashed like immediately, busted open my elbow, bent my handlebar, so the handlebar was rotating in the stem. I mean, it was nuts. Like within 10 minutes to start, but I finished the race and had like an almost completely tacoed wheel. Somehow I was able to finish on that and banged it back into place, and just kind of fell in love with mountain biking after that because of the challenge. And then moving out to Lincoln, Lincoln has some decent mountain biking. Omaha has some decent mountain biking, but lots of gravel, as you know, in the Midwest. So kind of got into gravel after that. So this exploration for me has always been really the main reason why I like to ride and the adventure. And also community. I mean, it's just a great community around bikes too.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're part of that community and part of what continues to kind of nurture that community, which is very cool. So for mountain bikes, like, would you ride gravel on your mountain bike just as training for mountain biking?
Yeah, initially all I had was mountain bikes, and we would do that whenever the single track was wet, just to try to get some additional miles and keep in shape. And then I really didn't like it all that much. Obviously, as a mountain biker, you like riding single track, but after a while, it was kind of fun going to some small towns and find some pretty cool things along the way, like a cool little cafe you stop in and you meet some pretty fun people, or hey, this one dog always comes out and wants to just hang out for a bit. You stop and pet it and whatnot. So I think after a while, just riding gravel just to maintain my fitness, I really started to enjoy it.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a lot of our origin stories. We did Leadville in the early OOs, and the mountain bike gravel was our training ground for long races like Leadville because you could only do. There really wasn't a lot of single track back then, at least locally. We might have had a 7-mile trail or whatever. So it was gravel, and it's not that we loved it; it's that it was there, and we kind of had to use it, and you kind of develop a relationship with it, just like you said. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how'd you end up going long? Because Trans Iowa, for those who don't know, it started riding across Iowa. You had 36 hours or so to complete a gravel ride across Iowa. You were given cue cards, and gun went off at 4 a.m. and off you went to from the Missouri River to the Mississippi River in one push. That's a far cry from single track around Omaha.
Right, yeah, for sure. Well, I liked the kind of the 6-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour mountain bike races. So I knew I could do those. I mean, this is sleep deprivation and just being on the bike that many hours. So decided to give it a shot. But to tell you the truth, my first Trans Iowa that I actually competed in, I did sign up for the second version, but it was rained out, or actually wasn't rained out. You guys all started in the rain.
We did. It was horrible.
I had a work conflict, so I couldn't do that one. So my first Trans Iowa was version 3. My longest ride up to that point was only 100 miles. So I was just like, I'm just going to try this and see how far I can make it, And I remember going over 100 miles, like, wow, this is my longest ride I've ever done, 101 miles. So I only had like 240 more to go or something like that.
Right.
But I didn't finish that year, but I did get, I think, 240 miles or something.
Wow, that's awesome.
Some major, like, I think you've talked about this before, like IT band problems.
Yep.
Man, I was just wrecked by that. After like 240 miles, couldn't even walk, so I had to pull the plug.
Yeah, I can relate to that, unfortunately. What was the first one you finished?
I think the next year was the year that it was shortened. And if you remember that one,
I do. That
where
was my second attempt. And
yeah, like
oh, I have a story of stark raving fear from that one.
was God, all of them kind of run together for me
Yeah,
now.
that
Was
was
that the
the
year?
lightning storm.
Okay,
I,
that was
I
lightning
remember
storm year.
being east of the city of Newton, and I'm high on this ridge crossing over the interstate, and there's freaking ground strike lightning all around. And I
Yeah,
saw a truck stop sign to the west, and I took the first gravel road to the right and beat feet to that truck stop, and was literally like the hair was right like all stuck up on my arms because of the lightning. It was crazy scary. I don't know how anyone continued. I don't. What was your story that day?
man, I just figured I knew it was really sketchy. Like, well, it was still dark too, wasn't it? It
Yep.
was raining. It's like, well, if I go out this way, at least I go out doing something I love. And I know a lot of people. Where I was talking to them passing because it's really hard. You don't really know who you're next to because your beam of light is in front of you. And back then we had like maybe 150 lumens of light
Maybe.
power,
Yeah.
if that. So I mean, really, you're almost riding in the dark. So you really don't know who you're riding with until the sun comes up. But I just remember asking like, "Hey, you gonna take shelter?" And like it was 50-50. Like, nah, I'm gonna keep on going. Like, and I just like, oh, I'm just gonna keep on going too. I must have been riding next to someone who said, "Let's just keep on going." But yeah, there were some scary times and some transitions with lightning. Now we had one year. I was riding with Steve Fuller, Sarah Cooper, Ben Oni, a bunch of other people, and we saw this crazy storm coming up. And have you ever seen orb lightning, or have you ever heard of orb
I've
lightning?
heard of it.
Yeah, I never knew what it was until I saw it, and I had to like look it up. Like, what was that, guys? And it was like pink lightning that dissipated into these like balls, like lightning balls. It was the weirdest thing. And after we all saw that, we're just like, let's find some shelter. And we just
Yeah.
beat for like a corn crib. It wasn't even a farm. And we got in. It was either a corn crib or a barn, and then just downpoured after that. But I mean, lightning is a real threat, out there on the plains.
For
When
sure.
you're out there completely exposed. People don't realize that. You don't think about it like how it is in the mountains. Obviously, you're up higher, but there is still a threat with lightning in any kind of storm. You got to be careful.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. What was it that kept you coming back? You did 11 starts. Why'd you keep signing up?
Just the fun, the challenge. The first year, even though I didn't finish, I got to ride with some people, and I made some good friendships from that. And just the stories and the experiences you had, and the sense of the community when you're out there, like it really, the competition wasn't. I mean, there was competition, but for us, we were just trying to work together to finish, and
Hmm.
we were all helping each other out, and that was demonstrated through the whole entire event. Even after I pulled the plug, um, we were still kind of like just making sure other people were okay if they needed to, because there were some storms there. I think that year as well. Um, I just loved it, and caught the bug, and it gave me something to train for every year. It was earlier in the year, April, so it gave you a reason to train and keep on riding throughout the winter. So good motivation. Um, yeah, I had to keep coming back.
That's awesome. Um, do you remember some of your bike setups from those days?
Pretty pretty basic. Things have changed a lot. So
For sure.
riding a cross bike,
What's one of
you know,
your
I,
most
I
what's one of your most memorable bike setups from TI?
I think just a standard cross bike with as much clearance as possible. I think I would be running 35C tire at the biggest. Most time, if I knew it was going to be wet, 32s. And then, I didn't really have any huge bags on there. I just try to carry everything in my pockets and just try to race to the next location. Always carried probably 3 or 4 tubes. Try to stuff those in a small saddle bag, and just really what you had to focus on is a way to figure out how to read your cue sheets. And like every year, like okay, you try to improve upon it because you would realize during the event like, oh, I should have tried this. This would be better for next year. So every year I kind of try to improve upon those, or just even having like a small light on your helmet to see the cue sheets better, or having like a rubber band that you can slide down because you'd be so tired, you forget what line you're on. Like, what road am I on, huh? And just tweaking those small little things. I mean, for me, that was probably the most memorable thing I think about with my setup is the cue sheets and lights. As we started, like I said, not much lights. I started with like a small blinky and was like, I'll be fine. We're not going to be going that fast in the dark anyway. But you needed to be able to see the street signs. So, I always had to get a better light and just make sure I was taking the right turns. And sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would take the wrong turn. And you've probably done that before during a trans Iowa. You take the wrong turn, you get lost for a little bit. You'd have to backtrack to where you got off the course, try to figure out where you were on the cue sheets. And I mean, you could spend an hour doing that, and you're only allowed so many hours, which is about 10 mile per hour average. So if you chewing up an hour, your chances of making the cutoff are, a little bit tighter.
Yeah, a lot of it tighter for sure. Yeah, both of those things we take them for granted now. You throw your Garmin on and plug in the route and you're good to go. And with Garmin's extended battery lives now, like it can make it through a Trans Iowa. Back in the day, you got cue sheets and you only got some of them. You had to earn the rest of the route by getting to the 2 checkpoints on time.
And you think about how much we would stop on the bike too, because you would stop sometimes just to kind of like, okay, let me check the cue sheet, make sure this is the correct one, because after you take a wrong turn once, you don't want to do that again.
Right.
So it was beneficial to stop in an intersection just to confirm, like, all right, this is the road I'm on, this is the road I'm supposed to turn on, and just double check. So all those stops throughout 300 some miles really added up.
Yeah, big time.
So that's what made it really tough for folks who were trying to finish. If you do that, probably 150 times, it can be 2, 3, 4 hours of stoppage.
Yeah, easy peasy. What was your favorite cue sheet setup?
I think my favorite, I had a Banjo Brothers deal, and I would basically just, in a plastic bag, Ziploc bag, I would have a cue sheet for one and the next cue sheet on the backside. Yeah. So I would just flip, take it out of the Banjo Brothers, slide it back in, so that minimized how much you'd have to stop versus, having to stop every time and turn a cue sheet, but then you would just do 2 at a time. And so you could save a little bit of time that way. I know some folks would try to make like a booklet, like this really ornate booklet. They would slide each cue sheet in so they could just turn, but you'd have this huge honking thing on your handlebar, and that would take up a lot of real estate. And I liked having all the extra hand positions on my drop bar just for fatigue factors. So I didn't want to do that. So how about you? Did you have a pretty good setup?
I didn't have a good setup, and the Banjo Brothers came after a while because there was nothing when we first started Trans Iowa 1, 2, 3. There was nobody thought of that. There was not a need until Trans Iowa. And thank you, Guitar Ted. My favorite was a paint stick strapped to my stem, and then I had another paint stick across it, and then I had the like alligator clips, the cue cards in a Ziploc bag to the paint sticks, and honestly, that was probably my favorite.
That's actually pretty clever, and that's kind of cool. Like, I'd always enjoy seeing other people's setups and like try to take ideas from them and share ideas, because reading the cue sheets, that was always kind of a challenge, especially for people out there listening. It was literally printed on just 8.5 by 11 white paper, like white office
that
paper.
Melted in your back pocket.
Yeah, so if it rained, those were done. Yep. So, one year actually I used, because I work in the medical field, I used, kind of gross, I used a laboratory sample shipping bags, because they're clear and they're waterproof. So I used those for my cue sheets, and they kept them pretty dry. But then you'd have to have a lot of those in order to put the sheets in. So it kind of created like a book, and that was just too cumbersome. After that one.
Gosh, those are great memories. Again, you take it so for granted. The Garmin's on your handlebars now, and you plug and it tells you which way to go and yells at you if you miss the turn. It's awesome. So much easier now.
So I got to tell you a story about a cue sheet though. It was my second year in Trans Iowa. It was a shortened year, and I think only 5 of us finished. Joe Miser ended up winning it. I think John Gorilla was there, Charles Parsons. I think Charlie Farrow was maybe the other person, and myself.
All legends, man. You just mentioned legends.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I was the last one to get the last checkpoint. I think I made it there just barely in time because my cue sheet said it was going to be in the cemetery. They decided to move it. So I got to the cemetery. I'd taken my shoes off. I decided I'm quitting because I thought we still had to do like under 120 miles. And I'm like, gosh, it's like 2 minutes to midnight. And then my friend calls me. He's like, dude, you need to get to the checkpoint. Like, I'm at the checkpoint. He's like, no, they moved it to the town square. I'm like, where's the town square? Like in the middle of Iowa, rural town, it's super dark. So I start yelling, in a small town, and they yelled back, and I eventually followed the sound. I got there with like 10 seconds to spare.
Oh, man.
So when I got there, they're like, hey, they hand me the cue sheet. I'm like, I'm done. No, I'm done. Like, no, dude, they shortened the course. You only have 20 miles to go. I'm like,
I just won the lottery.
Those cue sheets. I was actually like, really? Like, give me the cue sheets. I was kind of mad. It's like, I can't quit now, So they gave me the cue sheets, but they were handwritten.
Oh.
So really hard to see, had hardly any light, handwritten in pencil. So I take off. I get lost immediately leaving that town. I somehow ride around this little small town for like 40 minutes, find the right way, start going, and then I thought I see something that said, look, turn right on B5 road. So I look for B5 road, can't find it, so I just keep on going straight. I go, well, because they didn't have mileage on the amended cue sheet, so I just keep going. And I go for like 15, miles. I'm like, all right, well, it's got to be here. Maybe it's a different county, because there was numbers in the county I was in. Like, okay, it must be the next county. It switches over to letters and numbers. And I just keep going, and like it's past 20 miles. I'm like, all right, something's wrong. They told me it was 20 miles, and I think Mark's told this story before, like how they went out looking for me, trying to figure out where I was. So I backtrack, and I must have went back and forth so many times, the same road over and over. Got chased by the same dog. Well, finally, I run into Mark and Dave Powell's, and they take me into the small town, and they guide me in there, and we finish. Well, come to find out that B was actually a 1 and a 3 written so closely together. It looked like it was 135. I was looking for B5.
That didn't exist.
Literally. It didn't exist. So I always laugh about that story because I say, oh, Corey's got these navigational challenges. Well, I do, but I was looking for B5.
Do you know what I'm impressed with after hearing that story? I'm impressed that Guitar Ted and Dave Pals are still alive.
Yeah.
Dang, man.
I think I cursed their name.
I'm sure you did. Holy cow. Man, after such a long ride.
Oh, I had done at least 40 miles because they were like, oh, it'll only take them like 2 hours at most. It was 4 hours had gone by, and they're like, we better go start looking for this guy. So that's when I basically was starting to backtrack all the way back to the town I started in, when they gave me the cue sheets, and that's what I ran.
I'm impressed they found you.
So, yeah, I think actually what I was going to do is like, you know what, I'm bailing. I'm just going to go to this highway and just try to ride back to that one town because I could still see the lights. So I wasn't super far from that town, and that's when they ran into me. I think I might have just turned on 135 luckily, and I was literally like a mile and a half from where I was supposed to go.
Wow.
So I was really close to where I needed to be.
That's crazy.
But yeah, fun stuff.
That's persistence. So out of Trans Iowa came I don't know if out of Trans Iowa came, but in Nebraska, you guys kind of drummed up the Pirate Cycling League. What's the origin story of that?
So Craig Schmidt and Troy Kraus, a couple of roadies, they were getting kind of tired of the road scene here and really enjoyed riding gravel and just doing kind of non-traditional cycling events. So Craig and Troy created the Pirate Cycling League and started hosting some like crits, point-to-point stuff. And I started going to those immediately when they started hosting them and just offered to help out with whatever. And so I was kind of like maybe the third member of the PCL, and I created a blog and that helped get the word out. And then folks started showing up to the event. First, it was only just a handful. Then it ended up being, a lot more, and just kind of grew into a really cool local thing here in Lincoln. And we spurred other events such as like Gravel Worlds, which was called the Good Life Gravel Adventure before that, a gravel event based in Lincoln. And the PCL's been around now for over 15 years. Just a kind of a club anyone can join, as long as you're cool and just support the community and foster folks in the sport.
You guys must feel pretty strongly about being cool, because that's actually rule number one for Gravel Worlds is be cool.
Exactly. Always be cool,
no
man.
doubt. No doubt. So, 15 years ago was the first Good Life gravel ride, 2008, 2009. How did it evolve into the Gravel Worlds?
Well, just an idea. There was the Single Speed World Championships. Those were pretty fun events. We wanted to keep gravel kind of the same way, keep it fun, keep it light. So I thought of the idea of calling it Gravel Worlds. And I thought, what better place to do it than in the middle of the country around a lot of gravel in the Midwest. So in 2009, I was like, all right, we're going to create Gravel Worlds, and next year will be our first year, 2010. And it's been going ever since then. And every year it's just been growing and growing and growing and reaching more people. And in my mind, it's kind of evolved from, kind of a grassroots. It still has that grassroots feel, but to more of a, more premier event with folks coming from almost every state and then multiple countries. So it's been fun to see that growth and really impact a lot of people and get people excited about doing gravel and give folks something to train for and then challenge themselves.
Why do you think it's grown every year?
Yeah, I think folks just realize that the gravel's, it's a cool vibe. It's fun to ride, not just in loops in a small loop, but to actually go different places and see different things and experience those small communities and really experience the terrain a lot more than you would like in a car on pavement. On the gravel, as you all know, there's some pretty good elevation gain. Like the interstate, they just pick the flattest route possible. But you just get a little bit north of the interstate, like in Lincoln, and you hit what we call the Bohemian Alps up north of town, and a lot of elevation. And over the course of the 150-mile event, we'll have 10, 11, 12,000 feet of elevation gain. So we don't have a big climb like in the mountains, but all those smaller ones, just like you in Iowa, those things can add up. But on gravel, you can really experience the land more and have more time to bond with people, less chance for interactions with cars, and just a lot more freedom.
Having driven across I-80 many, many times, I can say that I think it would have done Nebraska a favor to run the interstate through the scenic parts instead of along the flattest parts, because we just can't wait to get out of Nebraska and into Colorado. But that was an editorial comment by Dave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I understand. The interstate corridor, they pick it for a reason. It's flat, and it's the easiest way across the state.
And it is bone flat, for sure. But I actually do enjoy going. You're essentially riding through the Platte River, which is kind of cool. So sandhill cranes and herons and all the wildlife and the birds, and it can be very pretty. So I make fun of Nebraska,
sure.
but I'm from Iowa, so that's part of my job.
Well, Iowa's also beautiful too. You just get a little bit off the interstate, and you got a lot of
100%.
beauty there. Like now where the Wind and Rock is hosted every year, the Winterset region. There's some big hills around
for sure.
there. And that town's a gem too. It's really, really cool. If you haven't checked it out, listeners, definitely go check out.
And it has something in common with your home county of Ashtabula with the covered bridges.
Yeah, well,
although we got
true.
a book and a
That's
movie named after ours.
Well, I'm a little jealous.
Fair enough. So you've been involved in Gravel World since its inception, and I am curious. Like the buck stops here, right? With you. Have you had any oh crap moments as race director? Like,
Yeah, there's always some things that go wrong, but first of all, it's a team too. I may have founded the event, and over the years I've been the main guy, but it's always been a community and a team that's always helped host the event and actually execute it. Now we got an amazing team. So, but yeah, there have been some hiccups in the past, like a train one year blocks of participants, and that's just something that happens even at larger events too. You know, you can do your best to look at schedules and try to predict, but occasionally a train that wasn't on the schedule comes through and will stop right where the course will go. It's
Actually,
unfortunate.
stop. Oh,
Oh yeah, stop, change
oh,
conductors or something. Completely block it. So it's like, well, people would call me during the rent, like, well, you gotta
yep.
wait.
Nothing
You
I can
know,
do about it.
like what can I tell you? I had to wait for a train a couple times before going into Emporia for a
Yep.
finish. It happens. So it's
Hopefully
not
they keep
ideal.
moving.
But yeah, exactly. But overall, I mean, not a lot of major hiccups, just some smaller ones like that, or maybe a cue sheet in the early days would have like a wrong, incorrect number, like Southwest 56 versus
Oh,
58 happened one time. I think I actually rode out to the course and like took a bunch of large white rock and made an arrow on the ground to like indicate, because I didn't have any marking paint with me. So everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I saw the big gravel arrow on the ground. I knew
that
where to
is
go."
race
Like, all right,
director
awesome.
ingenuity right there. I
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
That's awesome. What brings you joy the weekend of Gravel Worlds?
Seeing all the folks there and enjoying the sense of community, and then having them start and then most of them finish, cross that finish line, and just celebrate their accomplishment, and really realizing that they've done something special with a special group of people. That's always fun. And there's always great friendships that are formed during these events. You know that after doing Trans Iowas, you share an experience of like a Trans Iowa Gravel Worlds with somebody, and even though you may not see them very often, if you do see them, you can share some really cool stories, and you're always happy to see them and relive that experience. So seeing people experience that, that's always awesome. And then also talking to a lot of folks, because you and I still participate in events, and we have a chance to do that at our events too. Like, oh hey, I haven't seen you since the last thing, and oh man, remember that one time where lightning storm, or then we found a Casey's that had fresh pizza just taken out the oven. That was the best thing ever, because we were starving, talking about food for the previous 3 hours straight and about what we're going to eat, and then we finally hit a Casey's and just gorge ourselves. So all those stories are fun, and the shared experiences you
Yeah,
have
that's
with
awesome.
people.
I think everybody listening can probably relate to all of that. I think that's part of the shared community is that we all share similar experiences wherever they are, from Vermont to California and everywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
So your history at Trans Iowa, your history with Gravel Worlds and the Pirate Cycling League. Do you got a arg matey in you? Do you guys do that?
R, R matey, R. Yeah, I
Do
do
you?
the
That's
R
nice. That was good.
occasionally. Yeah, yeah.
Um, all of that led you to be among the inaugural classes we've described of the uh, Gravel Hall of Fame. Do you remember when you were first kind of notified, when it became real, when you realized you were going to be inducted into the Gravel Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it was a huge honor to be even nominated. Honestly, I didn't really think, hey, I'm not going to make the first class, but people are like, oh yeah, you will. Like there's a really amazing group of people who were inducted last year and also this year who've really contributed a ton to the sport. And I guess being the self-deprecating person I normally am, I usually just minimize my own personal accomplishments and contributions to the sport. But looking back, like people talk to me about like, oh, I guess I have been here for a while, and I guess I did help out quite a bit, and I guess maybe I do deserve to be in there. It was, like I said, a huge honor, and I'm hoping I live up to the honor itself, and really help a sport continue to be a great, welcoming, inclusive
What
thing
do you
for
think it
everybody.
means to be in the Hall of Fame? Like, what does that mean for not just you, but your event and really the sport of gravel, which is, I would still say, maybe a toddler, not in its infancy, but still experiencing growing pains for sure. But what does this Gravel Hall of Fame mean and do for the sport of gravel?
I think it helps legitimize it as its own sport. And I think a lot of folks who came to gravel came from different disciplines as a way to try something new or just keep in shape. And for many years, it really wasn't thought of its own discipline. I remember when I was transitioning from mainly going from mountain bike to sticking mainly on gravel, people were like, "Hey, man, why are you doing all this gravel stuff? Is it really any fun?" And then eventually they would try it, and they're like, "You know what? I'm a gravel convert too." They would get it. So, having this Hall of Fame, I think, recognizes the contributions people have done and really celebrates all those accomplishments, and also recognizes the fact that it's been around for a while. And I got to be honest, it's been around before the current gravel revolution, if you want to call it that. People have been riding on gravel for forever. I mean, probably ever since bikes were invented. That's mainly the surface dirt roads they're riding on. So it's maybe nothing new to ride on unpaved surfaces, but the current thing we have going on right now that really kind of started mainly, I think, in the early aughts and kind of grew into what it is today. Having a Hall of Fame, I think, really helps legitimize the impact that it has had on cycling. And look at now, you can buy gravel specific bikes, you can buy gravel specific gear, and the industry is really, at first they didn't really think much of it, and we were having to make our own modifications with the current bikes, cross bikes, mountain bikes, or whatever, road bikes, and tweaking gear and tires. But now they have stuff just designed for these larger events. So I think it's here to stay, honestly, and I'm really happy about that. And the Cycling Hall of Fame is just a way to help put a stake in that it is really
It
legitimate
is.
sport.
I agree with you. It's also a sport that, like I said, is kind of in my opinion, in a toddler stage of life, still experiencing growing pains. From where it came from, like Trans Iowa specifically, like you sent in a postcard, there was no entry fee. I'd be shocked if they had insurance. Like races were, I would call renegade, was very common. Like, hey, just show. I put on a renegade race once. It's just like, hey, show up. If you want to throw some money into a hat, we'll give it to somebody who needs it. Here's the route. Write down
Mm-hmm.
your time when you finish. Like that was the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's really where gravel racing evolved from to today. Like huge, huge corporate events, a la Lifetime, uh, 3-digit entry fees, chip timing, live broadcasts, pros who make their living just racing gravel. Like it's a whole industry, and it's grown up from that in the past. Well, since you and I did Trans Iowa, 2 and 3. How do you feel about where gravel has come from and what it is today? And then I'm going to ask about what you think about its future. So have that in mind. But what do you think about the evolution
Well,
so far?
in my mind, and I'm sure you feel the same way about this too, is it's a really fun sport. So I get it. If people are asking me like, do you really think this was going to happen with gravel? Honestly, I'd say, yeah, I did think it was going to happen with gravel, because the earlier events, even though they were crazy long distances and people thought we were nuts for doing it, just being out there, experiencing those roads in those communities, it was fun. It was an adventure. So back then, I even thought like if they were just to do different distances, this could reach more people and have a bigger impact. So the evolution to where it's gone from the nutty distances just for a handful of people across the country who were crazy enough to do it, to having smaller distances, shorter distances, and opening up to more people. To me, it just makes sense, and I think it's great for cycling. It's great for small communities along the routes. It's great, I think, in my mind, for everybody. So I'm happy to see how things have evolved to impact more people. Obviously, whenever there's something that's successful, there's a profit motive too for some folks. That's always going to happen. I can't fault that. Just like how it is with like marathons, I would never go out and run a marathon, but maybe I've signed up for a half marathon in my time, or like a 10K. Getting people out. If you didn't have those distances, you're not going to have as many people out running. So same thing with gravel. Impact more people. It's a positive thing in my mind, and I think it's been great, the evolution of it. As far as the future, there's always going to be events that are, like you say, kind of renegade style. There's always going to be events like Iowa Wind and Rock. It's still kind of the original Trans-Iowa model, where postcard entry, limited number of participants, crazy long distance, crazy challenge, really difficult challenge. Early in the spring, could be wet, can be windy. Obviously, a lot of white rock can be down because it's early in the year. So the challenge level is extremely high. But there's also going to be some events that are locally, that are free, that are shorter too, that offer an opportunity for folks to get their feet wet, to experience it, to get bit by the gravel bug. So I'm optimistic about the future. Gravel doesn't have to be just one flavor. There's a lot of different flavors of gravel, and people can decide and pick what they want to do and support whatever flavor they want, or try multiple flavors. So it's a good thing in my mind, and the more people we get on the bikes, the better.
Two things. One, Gravel Worlds has, and I should say Garmin Gravel Worlds presented by Lauf. I'm hoping if I say that enough, a bike will show up in my garage, but with a computer on the front.
There you go.
I'm sure you guys are great at not being static, at listening to what consumers, I'll say, want or ask for, and being receptive and trying to provide that. For instance, hey, we'd love to get together in the winter and ride. So you put on a winter, gravel, frozen dirt ride. You're open to non-binary. You've got a non-binary category. You've got a 50K gravel ride, which is 31 miles, which, if you're coming from 300 miles, why would anyone sign up for a 30-mile race? Because they've never done it before, and that's what they want. And you guys are great at listening. You add the run, 50K, 10K, 25K? Is that the middle one? 25K.
Yep, we had a 25K this year, yep.
You work with Mid-South at doing a combo race. So you guys really seem to be open to trying new things and exploring and being creative. What's in your brains for the future? Where are you taking this thing?
Well, you never know. We also have a 300-mile event that will potentially, we haven't released the route yet, maybe go to Iowa and back. We're always thinking of new things. Yeah, exactly. There you go. And that's the cool thing about gravel. It was kind of a blank slate. You can make it what you want and get input from people and take some good ideas, take the feedback, try new things out. It's keep it fun and try new things. So we're always willing to look at additional events. And there's another pretty cool idea event. Some of my buddies who do the Pony Express down in Marysville, Kansas, they do a pretty cool idea. They have a bike packing event. So before the Saturday is the main event, they bike pack down to a place to camp the night before, just in a leisurely kind of non-race format camp. And then the next day, they have a race back to the finish line. And they start at a designated time. Like, you have to start at 7 a.m. or later and race back. But you have to carry all your gear. Stuff like that. That's a really cool idea. Like, wow. Like, I never thought of that. That'll be fun. I wouldn't mind trying that someday. And then you can ride down with people the night before, talk about gear, have a good time hanging out, make sure maybe you get a little bit of sleep if you're trying to race the next day, but stuff like that. And that's where the blank slate thing is. Try things out. If people like it, great. If not, look at doing something else the following year.
Well, it's time for your commercial. Garmin Gravel Worlds presented by Lauf. It's twice I've said Lauf. There's three. So I feel like when I get home tonight, there will be a present in my garage. Lincoln, Nebraska, August 25th and 26th of this year, which is 2023. You mentioned 300 mile. The main event of Gravel Worlds is 150. How'd you come up with that distance? Why 150?
Well, there's obviously the really popular event down in Emporia, 200 miles, and I just wanted to try something a little more than 100 miles and just decided on 150. So it's been around for a number of years, and it stuck. So it's more of a challenge than 100, especially in August in Nebraska. So people just love that distance.
Very cool. And what else is available?
As far as other events, we have the Privateer presented by CycleWorks. That's going to be a 75-mile event. We have the Buccaneer presented by Panda Racer. That's a 50-kilometer event. And we have the Long Voyage presented by Goodr. That's a 300-mile event. So those are the actual cycling events. And we also have the Landho presented by Fleet Feet. We have a 50K, 25K, and a 10K.
And if you want to do both the run and the ride, you are welcome to. I know last year was just the 50K, and you had a combined scoring, I guess, for somebody who did both.
Yep.
I'm sure you still have that combined scoring, but is it only the 50K, or do other distances count as well?
So you could do a half, which is going to be the 25K and the 75-mile event. So you can do the full distance one, the 50-mile or 50K run, and then the 150-mile,
awesome.
Or you can do the half.
What's the coolest thing about the Garmin Gravel Worlds presented by Lauf? See, there I go again. Just trying to make you happy.
There you go. What's the coolest thing about
what do you think the coolest thing
the whole
about
weekend?
It is?
Just getting together with everybody, and these events are like a reunion in a way, in my mind, and just seeing people and hosting them here in Lincoln and showing them all the cool things that Lincoln and the surrounding communities have to offer. That's what I really love. I'm really big into getting people on bikes. You know, my graduate degree is in exercise physiology. It's really a kind of a clinical exercise physiology. So I use exercise, or used to professionally, to get people better, you know, to treat diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, you know, post-stroke, all these different things, post-transplant. So I really believe in the power of the bicycle to make people better, you know, not just physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So getting people on bikes is amazing. But I'm also really passionate about trails in general. And Lincoln has an amazing trail system, trail network. In Lincoln, I think we're maybe close to 140 miles of designated recreational trails or on-street routes. And like I said initially earlier in the interview, that's what brought me here. And some folks who've come to Lincoln have seen all that Lincoln has had to offer. And we've had people actually move to the Lincoln area because of them coming to Gravel Worlds and found out that they really enjoy the community and really enjoy the freedom to ride out in gravel and just getting around town. I mean, my previous job before I work at home now, I literally just got on my bike, rode up my driveway, down the street a little bit, and then hopped on a designated bike route, down to a trail, and rode the trail all the way to my work, which is 8 miles. So
that's awesome.
That you can do that.
Sounds kind of like Des Moines. Des Moines has a great trail system as well. So Des Moines and Lincoln, maybe we have a lot in common. Yeah. That being said, we are both a big, I'm going to say Big 8, Big 12, Big 10 state. And so pretty much everybody in Iowa has a reason to hate Lincoln, Nebraska, but we won't go there. I have to tell you a story because it relates to how I'm going to wrap this up a little bit. When we did Leadville in the OOs, and I don't know why, but the group that we would go out with always wanted to drive halfway to either Kearney or Grand Island, Nebraska, and get a hotel, spend the night, and then make the rest of the trip out to Leadville the next day. And we would always pull our bikes out of the trailer and go for a ride and find some gravel. And the first year we did that, we got back and first I get a flat, and then Jason gets a flat, and then Duffy gets like everybody ended up with 2 flat tires. Sandburrs. And oh my gosh. And I vowed, like, I'm never riding gravel in the state of Nebraska again. I told this to Jason when he was on the pod last year. And I was like, I just really, I don't want to ride in Nebraska. Well, Jason did a great job of convincing me otherwise, saying that Grand Island and Kearney are different environments than the Lincoln area. And sandburrs are not the thing that they are out there. And he convinced me that I should come do Gravel World. So I'm super excited that my wife and I are loading up our tandem and we're heading out to roll is it Privateer, the 75-miler?
Yes. Woo!
We are
awesome. You're going to sail the gravel seas.
I'm super excited about it. Everybody from Iowa who's gone out to Gravel Worlds over the years, and you have sent some rainbow jerseys back to Central Iowa. Love that weekend,
awesome.
And we're stoked to take part. And I am packing 3 tubes and sealant and whatever else I need in order to stave off I still have in my mind that there's going to be sandburrs, even though I'm sure there aren't, but I'm scared of them.
They're not. I mean, honestly, I hardly ever flat now around Lincoln. And Western Nebraska, you do.
You guys have been rolling these roads for 15, 20 years. You guys have probably picked them all up. So thank you.
That's a good point. We probably have. Yeah.
Well, we're stoked to come out and join you guys for a weekend on the gravel seas and experience Gravel World. So, dude, thanks tons for coming on, getting home from vacation. Good luck as you guys prepare for August 25th through 26th.
26th, yeah. Thanks for having me, Dave. It's been awesome reminiscing about some old Trans-Iowa stories and just catching up, and we're looking forward to having you in Lincoln in August.
Looking forward to being there. Thanks tons, man. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with Corey. Hopefully you enjoyed getting to know him as well. Perhaps you can join us in August at the Gravel Worlds. Be sure and get all the details at gravelworlds.com and follow along on Facebook and Instagram. You can also get a weekly dose of the Gravel family on the Gravel Family Podcast, hosted by Jason Strobing and Sophia Gibson. Speaking of podcasts, if you do enjoy this little corner of the internet, I'd welcome you to rate and review on your favorite podcast service. And please consider subscribing so you don't miss an episode. And if you really dig it and would like to support the show financially, look for Bike Talk with Dave at buymeacoffee.com. There's a link in the show notes. If you do, I'd love to send you a Bike Talk with Dave sticker. I'd like to thank Chain and Spoke Coffee for supporting the show. You can order the beans for home brewing now at chainandspoke.com. And if you're traveling through Des Moines, stop by the shop at 28th and Ingersoll. Thanks also to BikeIowa.com for being the online host of Bike Talk with Dave. BikeIowa.com has one of the most extensive bike event calendars around. And if you're wanting to promote your event, it's simple and free. Just create an account and enter all the information for your event, and then you can always log back in to edit and keep your information current and up to date. One of the events that's on that calendar and you're going to want to put on yours is the Core 4, where no surface is left untouched. Check it out. When the folks at Core 4 say no surface untouched, they mean it. Champagne gravel, pavement, speedy single track, and all the level B roads. Core 4 doesn't stop at 4 surface types. They've got an ethos to get all bodies on bikes, and it comes through initiatives which supports socioeconomic justice, gender equality, and bike advocacy. It's all about community, opportunity, recreation, and engagement at Core 4. Go early, bring the fam. They've got everything. Bikes, bevs, packet pickup party at Big Grove, live music, free camping, and finish line fun for all. Do not miss the No Surface Untouched action in Iowa City on Saturday, August 19th. 100, 50, and 25-mile options. Follow along on Instagram at Core4Bike and get in the lineup. Well, Dee and I are stoked to hit the Core 4 this year. It's the week before Gravel Worlds. I think with the single track, we'll be doing it on our own bikes, but who knows? Maybe tandem? I don't know, yet to be decided. We sure hope to see you there. Well, that's it for this week. We hope you have a great Memorial weekend. May the sun always be in your face and the wind at your back.